one at a time. I mean, I think we can go through it, and anything that we see in the backlog that is not, especially if it's assigned to you, maybe take a few moments to clean it up. Do we want to take like 5-10 minutes and everyone can look at what's assigned to them and mark that done? Or I mean, I already had a chance to do this. I don't know that everyone did. Mark it done or close it or update it. Do we want to take 5-10 minutes and do that? Okay,
Hmm.
great. And then add what you're going to add to this sprint. I added the two that I will be working on this sprint, so I'm ready. But it's also pretty easy. Mine, my role I think is a lot more advisory. So I'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'll set a timer for 5 minutes, and that way we can another minute if we need it, but we won't waste time if we don't need it. Okay, so I set a timer. I'm just going to put myself on mute, and everyone feel free to jump in the board, close things, delete things. I like this fresh start idea a lot. Everyone good?
Hmm.
Okay. It's about 1 minute left. Uh, Thumbs up if we're ready to go. Okay, I see Gideon nodding. John, thumbs up. Nathan there. Okay, well, maybe we get going then. Let me just take one step back. I know while I was on vacation, the conversation about TEC strategy for 2024 came up. I haven't caught up on all. I've read through the thread, but I haven't really processed it yet myself. So maybe Sean or Gideon or Bear or Nate, maybe we give an update about that in preparation for planning the board. My task for myself is just to review everything that was already said and then share my own thinking about it. But maybe you have something that will help us put this sprint into context. I know Bear, you already have some dates, so maybe Bear, you'd be the best person to share what that planning looks like.
Yeah, I can I can talk a little about that, about the session on Friday that we had with it was Griff, Gideon, Sean, and myself. Um, we were kind of like the initial intentions. I tried to put together kind of like a proposal for a roadmap based on kind of like the identified priorities and initiatives that we've been working on or that we've been discussing. So there was no kind of like filter from my side to say like we should do this or we should not do this. I just tried to kind of like capture everything and just put it on a document and kind of like try to assign some timelines to that. But it was interesting because this um, together also with the budget and kind of like the numbers for that resulted in some more conversation and kind of like some more deeper reflection about whether we should actually it would be more like a conversation about the type of direction that we should actually take, if the direction that we're taking in regards with capital allocation idea, the incubation idea, and doing the grand rounds is the right one to to go for this year, or if there's another one, if there's an alternative, something that we're not considering, but that it's still worth to consider. So there was also this idea of trying to take some time, probably the month of January, to do some further analysis between the different options in terms of strategy and direction that we have for the TEC, and do as part of that analysis, think a bit more about um, the different kind of like use cases. For example, like like token utility. How could that be part of that strategy? Um, any particular business model specific to that strategy, if there's way to generate revenue at some point, if that's kind of like also aligned to the objectives that we defined, any risks that any particular direction would also imply. So kind of like taking the time to do some analysis, also to open it up to others, like we did in that group chat, to make sure that we are all in the same page, that that we have consensus, and that we can like we've said before, um, I forgot, it's commit and disagree and commit, right? uh, so we can focus on that and start fresh the year. But that probably would take some time. That was for me, I guess personally, kind of like the only thing that kind of like took me um, unprepared, because there are a lot of dependencies also from that in regards with team composition, with funding proposals, with budgeting, um, with what we do also during this month, like for this sprint even, right? Like what do we do now, right? So a lot of different questions came up from that. But at the same time, I do think it would be probably a beneficial process to go through and just use it to clarify and to uh, yeah, make sure we're all on the same page. I don't know if there's anything else, Gideon or Sean, that you'd like to add on to this.
No, I think that captures it really well, Bear, and I think it also kind of captures the surprise. I think I also was a little bit surprised, like, whoa, how did this happen? Now we're kind of in a delay mode. But having said that, I would say that it's probably a healthy thing to do, and I think that we've kind of gone from a mode where last year I was driving a lot of the planning and it was not very DAO like, but we kind of didn't have any other choice. So we kept doing that. But now with TCAN, I think we have a completely different opportunity for how we do that. And so I think that, just pausing right now, we do have this kind of like default assumption of like what the strategy is, which is like capital allocator kind of thing. But I think it's good to just take a pause and allow for everybody to kind of exercise all the other options and really look at that, like use this time, as long as we really do use it, to then kind of exercise those things, and so that we can either pick one of those other options and really lock down, or then feel really good, like, okay, we've looked at it, we've all looked at this, and this strategy that we're on actually makes sense, and let's really commit to it. And but I think that, like, even just looking at what Sean did yesterday, which was awesome, Sean, like, it's great because we're all starting to kind of like buy into strategy on a different level. So that's my added perspective. But I do agree with Bear. It does kind of put us into a weird pause mode right now, where we can make progress on some things, but some things are kind of blocked.
Sean, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, that was really well said by both Bear and Gideon. The piece I'm really pushing for is like just kind of how Gideon said, a pause mode at the very start of the year, taking at least this first week where everyone just kind of put assumptions aside and expectations aside and put all your ideas on the table. So if we can get everyone's fresh perspective of like, what's the highest timeline for the TEC, what's the highest potential, what should we focus on, it's the design thinking, like diverge and converge. So just taking a little bit of time at the very beginning to diverge and get everyone's voice out of like, what are the opportunities that we have available, and then the following week then converging and being able to see everything, all the options we have, and then getting everyone on the team to converge onto a single point, a single plan, and getting that full commit. This is what Griff really brought to this just last week in the TCAN meeting. Griff was like, it doesn't matter what we do, but if we can all 100% agree on the same plan, get a really, really clear narrative, and commit to it, then we can be successful. That's what Griff brought, and we all agreed. Like, if we have, it's all about the narrative, because we want to be ready for a bull run. And if we have a crystal clear narrative that makes sense, and we're all 100% on board and ready to push it together, then we can be successful. So that's what we're going to be working towards, is getting that really clear narrative over these couple weeks coming up.
That was super helpful. I don't know, Nate, I don't know if you had anything to add, but that was super helpful. Thank you.
No, nothing to add. I think YGG kind of explained it all there.
All right, great. All right, cool. So sorry to take a little extra time with that, but I felt it was significant and very relevant to our sprint planning, so necessary, and I appreciate everyone catching all of us up so well. So then maybe we jump into, I'm still sharing my screen, right? Okay, so for this next 2-week period between now and what is the end date? The 22nd of January. We can go through what our focus will be. even though we're in this sort of not quite holding pattern, but sense making. Maybe this is like the sense making sprint, which is a great sprint for us to a great theme for our sprint if we needed one. So, Gideon, do you want to do the honors of kicking us off?
It would be my honor. One request or one suggestion is that I've always, whenever it comes to like labeling what sprint we're in, I always forget, like, are we on 16 or 17? And like, it's because it doesn't mean anything to me, and it's just a number, right? So maybe there's a convention we can use that's actually just using the dates to name the sprint or something like that that's much more obvious. Because I'm constantly having to refer back to like, what sprint are we in? So having said that, I will go through.
So I started. I just renamed our sprint January 9th to 22nd.
Okay.
I like that idea too.
Okay.
That's why I started with like 2024 sprint 1, just to sort of like reset, but
Yeah.
being really explicit. Hopefully we don't run into a problem with, we'll see. Let's just go with January 9th to 22 for today. And as we go through the year, we'll see if we need to add a 2024 somewhere in it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go off of your screen, your shared screen. Oh, okay, wow. I'm not seeing that same view, but so I'll go back and change that one. The stakeholder study, that's all done. Those quotes were sent long ago, so I'll find that. It's weird. I got a different view here. And
I filtered. I have two filters set. One is by the to do in progress, and the second is by assigned to you.
Okay, let me see. Let me apply that. Okay. That brought that up. Okay, so that's done. So I'll knock that out. Then the other ones are the scope and research for the website. I'm recommending that we just call this and say, let's not do this right now, because I think we have too. I mean, it's super important, but we got a lot of things in front of us. So I don't know what the right label is for that. We don't really have one that's like archived. Basically, our choices are not going to do it or keep it in backlog. I don't know if, Tam, do you have a recommendation?
There's a pause.
Okay, that's what I have it as. So I guess we could just leave it as that. Okay. Does that capture it? Does pause? I feel like pause is it's like temporarily on hold, but that's fine. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it probably should be something like back burner. Like, let's think about this in 6 months.
Yeah. I don't know what to do that, but we can just leave it as pause. I don't know how many actual tasks will go into that, so I think it's fine. The incubation program strategy is, I've got a pretty decent draft of that. It's been reviewed by a number of folks, but I would say that is blocked for right now until we go through this bigger process. If we come out on the other side with the capital allocation strategy is what we want to end up going, then that will we can pick that up and change it, tweak it, or do whatever we want. But for now, it's blocked. Same thing for the marketing strategy. It's very capital allocator centric kind of strategy. But that one, I would consider that. That's gotten a lot of feedback. I would consider that done, but I think again, it's blocked for now. And then I missed this the team funding proposal. Is that for this one? Let me see. So this is really, I think this is more Bear driving this. I don't know. I'm like more like assistant, backup support, consulting. So I'm gonna let Bear take that, and then the NFT. It's just temporarily blocked. I'm been going back and forth with NT on whether or not we actually do need to issue an NFT to our sponsors. Like, I kind of don't think that they care about it, but if they do, I want to fulfill that. So I'm just trying to clarify that. So that's it for me. And I don't really have specific things that I will be working on in this sprint other than supporting this process of kind of strategic reflection.
Cool. And let me even give this a name, because I like that you just used the word strategic reflection. Strategic. Cool. Okay, Bear, are you cool to go next?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So for me, I was trying to clean things up. So I have basically kind of like two main kind of like projects. So it's like the fiduciary work and like internal work. In terms of the fiduciary work, there's the budget, the policies, and there's also one that I think it's still marked as to do in terms of reporting. I think for these ones, although I've been doing a lot of progress in the budget, we could probably mark it as blocked, at least for now, while we wait on the strategy work. In regards with the policies, I'm not sure. There's a document that I've also put together, but it's probably not like our biggest priority right now, I would assume, and that probably would take time to go through a better advice process. Yeah, just take more time to do that. So maybe we can just leave it as pause for now. Then, well, this is more of a, I guess, like project management question maybe for you, Tam. I have these two that are not like tasks, but they are like milestones that I've set them as part of the fiduciary stewardship work project. Sorry. So it's just kind of like a way for me to organize myself. So these are actually not like tasks, but they are just like um, things for me to reference to.
Yeah, I like it. For me, when I think of a milestone, I usually think of an exact date. A milestone is like, oh, this is like we've hit the milestone. And so often, like, if I look at this, in fact, I'll tell you my reaction when I saw this is like, oh, there's a milestone. What date is it? And then it was sort of like this date between November 20th and December 10th. And then I thought, oh, that's not what I think of as a milestone, or in project management, which is a milestone, which is like, oh, this is the date that this thing happened on. But here's what I think in general. If it works for you, keep doing it. If
Okay.
if you like having these milestones in your project, yeah, by all means, let's use them.
Okay.
But if we
Yeah, no, go ahead.
if we then look at it, maybe here on a map, we don't have a map. Okay, I'll organize the map in here.
I have
If
a
we look
map within the project. If you click on the fiduciary stewardship project, you should be able to look at a timeline. So maybe kind of like more on what you're referring to, that is, rather than milestones, these are more like phases we could call, or something like that. I don't know, but it's
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. So yeah, so annual budget for the TC, like for a project manager, this would be the task, is to work on the annual budget for the TEC, and the milestone is like delivered. So often it's like the date that you're trying to reach. But it doesn't. We need to just use what works for us. And if this is working, it's for you to see that these are milestones, which are periods of the project. Okay, that's cool too.
Okay, yeah, because I usually have like subtasks within each of these milestone tasks, So that's I guess that's something that could bring some confusion too. But that was kind of like the way I thought could be more organized. But yeah, I guess we can talk about this later or whatever.
Yeah, I like that organization too. I like the way this project is built into is really its own project, a self-contained project.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So besides this, then I have for the internal and operations. Yeah.
So would we say this one, the milestone 4, we'd say it's in progress, this sprint?
It's blocked, but yeah, I guess it's weird. I don't know. And it's kind of like a duplicate from the other task, right? So yeah, I feel that there has to be some tweaking here, but yeah, I guess we can set it as blocked for now.
Okay.
Okay, then for the rest, the website, yeah, I agree that we can set it as on pause. This contributor feedback form, it's also there. It's work that has been completed, but it would also need to go through more advice process. And at this point, I'm exactly not sure if we're ever gonna use this form. So I don't know if there would be a specific status for that. Yeah, not sure.
A performance survey.
I guess a lot depends on kind of like the future context of the team, on how we decide to organize ourselves. It could be useful maybe in the future at some point, but I don't know what would be the best status to set it as of today.
I mean, we can leave it as paused, but I agree that maybe we can add something that is more long term indicating than pause, like a long pause. Like back burner is the name that is often used. So maybe we can say things that we don't want to remove from the board, but like we can even take them out of the filter. We don't have to even look at them because we know we're not going to do them for a couple of months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think something like that could be helpful.
Okay. Okay. What else? We can keep going.
Oh, okay. Then we have the roles. This is work in progress. I am reviewing and adjusting all the active roles. Then we have the transition plan for Enti. That's also in progress. I'm working with him in making sure that that process goes smoothly for everyone. We have the recruitment process. That's an interesting one. I guess we could probably have a whole conversation about whether we should continue this or pause it for now. I'd be the one of the idea that we should probably continue moving forward with this on one way or the other. I feel that there are some roles that we need to hire for that are essential, no matter what direction we decide on taking. So based on that assumption, I think I would say for us to keep it in progress. Yeah, I don't know if I should stop there to see if there's anyone who has any thoughts on that, or if we should just keep moving. And then I have two more things on the backlog. Those because I guess we have to wait first until our funds for the last funding proposal run out, so we can do the impact tracker update. So that forum post with all the impact and the work of the team during the last few months. So that's on the backlog, as well as the team funding proposal that we're probably gonna have. No, I mean not probably. We're gonna have enough funds to cover for January still. So this also might be a bit postponed until February, probably. So that's also on the backlog. And the last thing is I'm also currently working on the 2023 financial year report for the coordination team. I'm actually pretty excited about that because it's the first year that I've actually been able to track everything in terms of finances since January all the way to December. So there's a lot of really interesting insights that are going to be helpful for future funding proposals, and to get to know better the team, and also for transparency purposes. I think that's going to be pretty nice. Yeah, that's in progress. I think that's it for me. I'd probably like to add, I saw, Tam, that you added for yourself a task that it was kind of like rethink on the direction or something like that. I'd probably would like to add something like that to my sprint as well. I think we should do that. Yeah, that one. Because yeah, I think we'll
Yeah.
spend some time thinking.
Yeah, this is what I think is probably, well, I'll jump into mine then. These two, this one I think is what I really spend my time on, thinking about. Well, just catching. Phil had some really interesting comments. Sean, you had a great document. I just want to go back and really think about what you wrote and then share my thinking. So I think this is really what I'll be focused on the time that I'm focused on TEC stuff over the next 2 weeks. And then I'm also following up on this list of the open issues from the migration. We have some nothing major. We have some issues that are still open that I just want to follow through. I noticed in the, well, I won't go into it here. I'll follow up with you there, but I did notice this doesn't seem to be working, but I noticed that you guys brought it up on the TCAN call. But just following up on those kinds of things, really, those are the two main things that I'll be working on. So that makes me done. And you're Bear, you'll add that, and then that's also your focus list. I mean, I think that's just all of our main focus, the sprint too. And so that said, Bear, is that all good with you? Shall we move on to Sean?
Yeah, I think that's everything.
Oh, Sean, are you ready? Are you cool to go?
Yep. So, you'll see there's like a handful that I have in backlog. Those were kind of all in progress until now, but I realized like it was kind of overwhelming to have like 5 different things in progress. So I just TQF development that actually could go on pause as well. But the main thing, yeah, just put that on pause, I'd say. And the main thing there, if you see, it's the TEGR3 grantee payouts. So this is we got to get these payouts. We've been waiting on a data set from Gitcoin, which is it's called the squelched data set, which is after they go and do their Sybil defense processing. And we usually get that directly from one of the data scientists on their team, which is Umar. But I messaged him before the holidays, and I still haven't heard anything. So I did ping him just now, and then I've also reached out to Isaac to see if he knows another way we can get that data set. So that's kind of the main thing that I would like to get done as soon as possible. Other than that, I think all my stuff, there's nothing that is extremely pressing, and I'll be mostly tuning into this like TEC 2024 review over this next week, basically over this sprint probably. And one thing I'm excited about is the TQF tool is like functional. It doesn't, like, I could see a lot of more development that could go into it, but it doesn't need that, and it can be used by our team and potentially other teams to facilitate grant round operations and exploring like payouts and things like that, and applying token data sets. So we can use that tool with where it's at now. I'll probably do a small amount of development to just like tune some things up, but I'm interested in writing the paper now. So basically all the time that I've been putting into development, I want to transfer that over into writing a paper that's going to summarize a lot of this. Yeah, some of the finer details behind what goes into that tool, and then some of the like plugging that into the narrative of the TEC. But again, that's definitely going to be moving really slow for this week ahead, because I think that'll be very informed by the discussions that come out of the TEC 2024 narrative. So pretty much everything like either on pause or move to backlog for now, other than getting these grantee payouts done. That's a really high priority for me.
Okay, so perfect. So I just added these two to the sprint so we could look at, I know that these are things, even though they're blocked, it's hoping you're working to get it unblocked, this sprint.
Yeah.
Cool, that's important. Okay, great. Thanks, Sean. I think that sums up all of your stuff. And Nate, you are you're up next.
I've got 4 that are currently in progress for this sprint. The January community call, which will focus on the stakeholder study and kind of a review of the OP migration. And then we have the token engineering public goods series number 4. And we also have onboarding with EFRA and the new content for the ecosystem content stuff. So one of the things that I want to get done is have the meeting with a couple of the guys to actually set up for the month of February to actually get a couple of new external content creators, Dr. Nick and Nate Eat Sleep Crypto, who continually do Twitter Spaces on a regular, to host on the TEC Twitter page, and to have kind of a consistent amount of content being produced by the TEC Twitter, to where we're actually kind of influencing the narrative and the discussion around token engineering and Web3 on a consistent basis, and having, reaching broader audiences. So that's another big one. But yeah, so those are the 4 that I have at the moment. There are a couple on pause. The migrate and update documentation. This is something that we should discuss, because that has been on pause due to a lot of reasons, but mainly, where we're going to host it and what information needs to be transferred over, and what, if we're moving towards kind of a broader, contributor base, then we need to have some type of onboarding docs and things of that nature. Yeah, I set up an initial kind of super site type thing but most of those, some of those links are not active anymore since the OP migration, so that has to be updated as well. But yeah, so there's those things. I have the 4 active ones, and then the 2 on pause.
Cool. Thanks. So this is a wrap for our sprint planning then. This is what it looks like. If we look at this sprint, actually, I'll just look at it. We'll look at it here. So this is what it looks like. It is, of course, very, I'd say, sparse, no, thin, no. Given that we have resources that have fraction time commitments to the TEC, I think this amount makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay, we're done a little bit early, which is great. And so then the question is, do we want to use the rest of this time to do something else? Or I'll stop streaming actually. Or do we call this call a wrap and use this hour for something else? I'd open the floor to people's thoughts on this. I think sprint planning can be an hour. So maybe I'll even ask if this felt like the right pace and the right tempo to everyone else. I'm going to propose that we make the sprint planning an hour on the next one as well. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing one head now. Okay, good. Yeah, I like that too. I think we can go through these. I think we can go through these in an hour. So then the second hour, is that okay for everyone? Instead of this first hour, can we do the second hour? Oh, I can't change it. I can't actually change the calendar. I'm seeing now. Bear or Nate, are you guys able to change the TEC calendar from the 23rd on? Can we make this the second half hour of the TEC sprint planning?
Yeah, I can take on that. I can do that. No worries. Before that, I was just gonna say, like kind of like thinking a bit on our yesterday's conversation, and this idea that we were missing, kind of like the review part of things. I was thinking if it wouldn't make sense to maybe just keep this call like 2 hours, and maybe use the first hour to review, like work from the previous sprint, and then use the second hour to do the actual planning. Would that make sense, or would it be better to have like a separate call on a different day to do the review? Or yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I don't have a very strong feeling, but I have a leaning. My leaning is towards keeping them separate. We've tried to smosh together the sprint planning and the review, or the review and the retro, and it always felt kind of rushed and then a little bit disconnected. So I actually don't mind the 2 days of 1 hour, but if everyone prefers having it 2 hours on one day, I would go with that. So really, maybe whatever, if anyone has a stronger feeling. It feels right to finish it felt right to close the retro yesterday, to have some time to think, and then to do our planning today. That felt good to me. Thoughts or other opinions?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I don't feel strongly one way or another, but this felt clean, and it felt more like these feel a little bit different. Like the qualities of yesterday's call is more reflective, and it's a little bit slower pace, and it's like you're trying to be deliberate and thinking, being thoughtful and stuff like that. This is much more like, what are we doing? Like it's move. And I think it might be a little bit cognitively challenging. Like we'd be tired, very tired at the end of the second hour. We might not put our very best effort in if we were to do this back to back. That's my thing. That's my thought.
I think that's a good point. I like the isolated, really clean sessions. Like I agree with what you said, Gideon, but I think there's a subtle point I want to pull out from what Bear put forward is like, do we need a structured slot for sharing our work that we've completed or that we're working on? Because that's kind of different than retrospective. Retrospective's like more about process. Like, how are we doing? How are things flowing? How's everything moving forward? And reflecting on the process. But I noticed that like I think the TCAN sessions tend to be sessions where we kind of present work and get feedback and reflect on things. But I think and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what TCAN's really good for. But just as long as we're mindful, like where is the structured sessions where people can bring their work and get feedback? Like TCAN is actually really good for that. And so maybe we just want to be more just more like conscious of like that is what the TCAN sessions are for. Or maybe that's not exactly what TCAN is for. And maybe we need a different session that is like where people bring their work and get feedback. And so I think there's a subtle point there that is in what Bear was saying.
Yeah, and just to clarify, yeah, what I meant is it was more like what Sean is saying right now, and not in regards to having the retrospective and the planning on the same day. It was this idea of having like a different session where we can present our work, where we can present our progress, and talk about that.
That makes a lot of sense. I haven't fully thought this through, but what I can share about the Scrum event review is from a development programming perspective, it's meant to allow the client to see completed work so that if they don't love it, there's a low cost to changing it as part of the next sprint. So it's sort of like this, continuously delivering model where you're always showing client completed work. And from this coordination perspective, we're not developing software and we don't have a client that we're delivering to, but the analogy in this kind of coordination work is that we have something of a, not quite pressure, but we're inherently incentivized to have something to show, completed work to show at the end of the sprint. The way Common Stack did it was having a YouTube, like we're gonna post this YouTube video at the end of the sprint. So what do we have to show? We turned it into a monthly thing. The way TEC had done it was at the community call, you show the completed work, and it's sort of fallen off the wayside. And I also do, I'm also cognizant of that. It does feel like a missing piece to be able to showcase completed work. And that is just a driver to also, it's motivation to complete work at the end of the sprint. There's some extra pressure to be like, oh my God, we're doing this review. What am I going to show? Oh no, it's been like my second sprint and I have nothing to show. I need to complete something. So it's something of a, incentive mechanism built into the sort of the Scrum process itself or framework itself. I'm really open to ideas. I had thought of something like a newsletter update, a post to the forum, some way to, the point is really to, if we think about our clients as the community and showcasing completed work as saying what was delivered, whether it's on a sprint basis, but it could also be a monthly basis if we wanted to change that cadence.
This is also making me think, would it also make sense to rather than thinking about it as clients or to the community, do it more as for like internal accountability between the team as well, for us to be able to continuously be able to share what we're working on, just for the sake of all of us knowing what's up, and just also for the sake of coordinating better and communicating better. Would that be also kind of like a fair assumption to do, or?
It could be, but I think it could be, of course. Yeah. But I think there's something I mean, it could just be okay for this team, for the team only.
I mean, I'll be honest. I think I like the idea of having, kind of even if it's not just a formal review session, just having kind of the hour prior to our sprint planning to be, an open work session to where we can say, hey, during this hour, we're going to work publicly. We can all show up if we want to share something, or if we're having obstacles with something, or if we just want to work through our sprint planning during that hour, we can do so. To be more prepared for when we are explaining what we're doing for our sprint. I think that would be something that would be really nice to have. Just, I think just having more open work sessions, kind of working with each other, would be really nice. But yeah, it's just an idea.
So have the first hour be like optional working session. Yeah, I mean, I like that idea too. I think, I wonder how many of us will be able to show up that optional hour, or will show up that optional hour. Does that make sense?
No, that's fair. Yeah.
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 But we can put any hour on the calendar as an optional working hour for the sort of like, co-working hour. I like that idea. But I don't. Bear, what do you think about the review? What do you think is a way we could incorporate, like, benefit from the advantages of having a review in our, remote distributed part-time for most contributors and advisors dynamic.
So the way I've been thinking about it, I think it's also really interesting, Nate's idea of kind of like having office hours at some point, and maybe that could be optional. But the way I've been thinking more about the review is that just like we go through the planning, like each of us say which tasks are they going to work on in the following sprint. For the review, we could just go just like that. Each of us reviewing the tasks from the previous sprint, and maybe that's a chance for each of us to say, okay, this is what I worked on. You can show the documents, you can ask for support, you can ask for help, people can ask questions. So try to make that process a bit more engaged, whether it's not also just like a presentation of each of us what we're working on, but more of a dialogue, and trying to actually, I don't know if in 1 hour would be enough to do that, kind of like with care and with touch, because there's also something that I really resonated with that Nate also mentioned yesterday. It's interesting because we have to be careful, because sometimes also it feels that maybe what you're sharing, it might not be it might not be what's the word,
On the radar?
relevant for the others, or they might not care much about that, and for example, I say that because in my case, I feel that sometimes with like more of administrative work or financial work, it might not be that appealing than working in the grants program or in the new project or whatever, right? But sometimes at the same time, I do feel like the need of like extra support or like extra feedback or more people getting involved in my work, and we've tried to do that asynchronously, but it hasn't fully worked out, for the same reason I think that Nate was mentioning, that not a lot of people will care, and that's fine, not a lot of people, not everyone will care about everything, but maybe we are able to assign a time to be able to at least showcase your work and have some conversation around that could be helpful. So that's what I've been kind of like envisioning, this prior hour before the planning, that we could go through all together and review this type of work. I don't know if that made sense.
I have an idea or a thought on this. I'm always, and maybe too much, cognizant of when you make time for a meeting, it they just accumulate. Meetings accumulate over time, and pretty soon you're in a lot of meetings. And so we've done a good job of like stripping down meetings to like what's just really necessary, but I think maybe we went too far. Like, I think that's part of what we're all realizing, is maybe we went too far on some of this. So maybe there's a way of like creating some sort of sign up or something, like holding space and then allowing people to say, gosh, this week I'd like to get feedback on this and this. And it kind of just goes into an agenda as like something. And that way, if there's no sign-ups for that, then we all know proactively, and we don't have to like carve out that time and we just don't do it. But to give space for people to, it's like a show and tell or something, I don't know, like feedback space. And actually, my point is more just signing up in advance for a slot. How would that work or not?
I think it would. I think that captures the intent.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to do something like that. In a way, also this idea that I was thinking of trying to bring, at least in my case, 2 more calls during the month, one for finance and one for people stuff. It was a bit thinking about that, like during the month we can try to put together an agenda for that call, like building on the agenda for that call. And if there's nothing to talk about, we just don't have the call, and that's okay, But maybe we accumulate a lot of stuff in regards to that topic, and we know that we have that space and that time to be able to talk about that, So maybe it's probably not exactly the same that you're referring to, but yeah, something similar. And I like the idea.
I do just want to add one more thing, is that I don't know if we need more calls. It's just figuring out how to be more focused in the calls that we do have is something that I feel we haven't been great at. I think we tend to, because there's a lack of stated focus for the meeting, that we kind of, diverge into a bunch of different directions, and it consumes the entire hour. And then we've kind of slowly gained consensus on some, macro things, but the things that really matter to the work that we're doing on a, week to week basis kind of go unattended. And so I think that is something that, if we can figure out a way to kind of better manage our meetings that we do have, because I know we have that one off sprint community call, our off sprint week TEC call, where I feel like we have just kind of naturally winged it for a while, in terms of creating an agenda, but maybe we can be more diligent about having that space open for creating a collective agenda with each other.
Well, I'm really hearing two things. One is this idea of the ability for us to showcase work that's done. And the second one is really like a feedback session, a space to get feedback from the rest of the team. I have a little bit of uncertainty about how successful an optional to give feedback meeting would be. I think if we all commit that we would be there, it would just be, I almost feel like it has to be a mandatory, like, please show up, because, giving other people in the team feedback is important. But that said, we could always try it. And if it doesn't work, decide not to do it. I'm a big fan of trying things. I think we agree that like this sprint can be an hour. So maybe, to keep the sprint and the retro at the same time. So Monday and Tuesday, that same hour, which is the second half of this sprint. And then we can either add an hour before or after this, maybe an hour before this or an hour before, for doing something like the review. Maybe it's a review of your work, and then we do the sprint planning right after that. It's a little bit more of the same kind of work than the retrospective is. And then we don't solve the review question. We do like feedback advice process before the sprint planning. And we don't solve this idea of like showing completed work every sprint. But I really think that should be part of the community call. We're showing to the community work that we've completed, and that having before the sprint planning a call where we can get feedback from each other on work in progress is different than the review, the purpose of the review. That I'd proposed we split this sprint meeting into two parts. One to do, hold on, and then even every other week. Yeah. So actually, this is interesting. Sorry. Here's what I'm proposing based on what I've heard from everyone. If I look at my calendar, I'm going to say the time in Portuguese time, but it's 4 p.m. is our weekly call. Maybe we just have a weekly call at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays, and that's our team call on a weekly basis. And we can have part of that team call carved for advice process on work in progress. And then every other week, the hour after, we have a sprint planning. Is that clearish? So every other Monday and Tuesday, we would have TEC sprint retrospective and sprint planning. And we would just have every Tuesday at 4 p.m., we have a TEC call. And part of that we might have a fixed agenda. And part of that will be like, hey, what Gideon is saying, who needs advice process, who needs feedback, share with the team, share with the team, share on a channel what you want feedback on. And we add it to the agenda for one of the Tuesday calls.
I like that. It's very simple. It means that we keep a rhythm, and I like calling it advice process because I think that's what we're all kind of seeking here is feedback and advice. You know, how's this going?
I like the rhythm part a lot. I mean, I've really become a creature of habit. And just knowing every Tuesday, 4 p.m., I'm with the TEC makes my weekly cadence easier to manage. And knowing that we have advice process on that call for anyone that requests advice process, I think solves the problem that Bear and Nate, you were raising as well.
Yeah, I like the idea. Definitely. I think we should try it out that way. It's pretty simple, but I think it can make a difference.
And then for the review, maybe we keep looking at these. We're doing them monthly, a community call monthly. Nate?
Yep, I think that's great. I can incorporate that into the format of the community call, and so we can just put that there.
Yeah, that's what's done. You know, and like in the next one, maybe we could talk about the migration to TEC. That's sort of one of the big things that we accomplished. Okay, it wasn't the sprint, but it's sort of like since the last community call, when the done work since the last community call. And maybe you can also be in charge of like managing that like what did we do? Well, what's been completed since the last community call?
That sounds perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that worked out well. Thanks for this time to talk through that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, it definitely was helpful. Um, just wanted to throw one more thing now that we're talking. I don't know if you guys have the time, but in regards to the what's the word, to the stand up, to the weekly stand up, we should take on that, continue that, and also any adjustments to that. Maybe will be a good time to talk about that. And the other thing was in related to oh, I forgot. Oh, just give me a second. It was important. But maybe we can start with this. Oh yeah, sorry, I just remembered. The maybe I can take on this, but I think it would be also worth having a cleanup of group chats. I think we have too many and with different topics, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel a bit confused in where should I chat, where should I send my message to, for the right people to receive it. So maybe it's worth also, now that we're doing like cleanup, do that for the group chats as well, and I can take on that if sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I think those are both good. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is this strategic pause and the process. I think it's going to be important. We have kind of like a rough outline of what like those dates are, but I think that if we're not careful, we could really get stuck here. And getting stuck with this is not just a little thing. Like this actually pushes everything out. So I think it's worth. I don't know if it's on this call, but I think it's worth detailing out like what does this look like? What do the deliverables in each of these phases actually look like? And also, I think it's important for us to agree in advance how we're actually going to make the decision itself. Because knowing that going in avoids misunderstanding and disappointment and frustration. And I just think it's important to clarify some of that stuff in advance. So yeah, it feels like this is such a good idea, and it also needs like some container around it to make sure that it actually delivers what we hope it will.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. And I regret that we didn't put the dates into our sprint plan, into our sprint planning. Maybe this is a good moment for sort of the milestones around the strategic reflection or sense making. I meant to look up the dates. I don't know. They are in a message, right? In a Discord message, I think is where I saw them.
I just got him. I'll put him in this. I'll put it in our chat.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that would be great. And maybe we can put it. We can make these myself or Bear. I don't know if you would. I like the way you made the milestones, but maybe we can make these milestones and put dates around them so that that's also really obvious in our sprint planning. And I think at least one fall into, if I'm looking at the 12th and the 19th both fall into this sprint. And then the 26th would fall into another sprint.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. I'm not sure where would be like the right place to add them to. Maybe to like internal operations project as part of that. You think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, in regards to the process, I mean, I can share my thinking. I feel like this week it's gonna be like really critical for that to be defined. The way I see it is that there are probably like two possible pathways. One being that people start sharing ideas and suggestions, and we end up with a lot of different options, a lot of different strategies, different directions that are not related, and that we actually that actually required uh, some further analysis. So that would probably translate in a longer period of time to be able to go through them and analyze them. And as part of the milestones here, the idea was for to have for this Friday, I think, like the final three directions that we could decide on. But again, if these three directions are pretty different, that might just make the whole process longer. So I feel that's one pathway. The other pathway that personally I feel that's what's going to happen. I feel like people are starting to share a lot of their ideas, how they look at strategy, and they are pretty similar. I think we are all in the same or in a similar page with this idea of the capital allocator, but maybe we're looking at it from different perspectives. But if we are, I think that's just gonna make the whole process way easier, way faster, because there's already a lot of analysis and a lot of work put into this specific strategy. So maybe it doesn't require a lot of time. It doesn't require maybe too much decision making, but it's more about just like confirmation of that's the right strategy. That's kind of like the two pathways that I see going forward. So yeah, I would probably say maybe just to wait till Friday to see what happens, what do people share, and then based on that, try to think more about the process.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm assuming the decision will be made in conversation and agreement in a TCAN call. Is that where it happens? On-chain vote, I'm assuming no. I'm assuming it's a group call. Maybe it's an on-chain vote with the people who would be participating in the work, doing the work, I think. Maybe it's not a community. I don't know. That's a really good question, Gideon. And now that I'm seeing that there is a due date of this Friday, I'm also thinking that, yeah, I'm not really sure what we mean. narrow our options down to three now that I'm looking at it. Three business models,
Yeah.
three strategic directions, three what?
Well, the kind of the context that this came up in was, I think, part of it is that Griff hasn't had time to go through some of the docs that are explaining the capital allocator. So for him, it's like there's no strategy. But I think the other thing so that was part of it. But then the other part of it was, I think he's like, well, what happened to the whole like matchmaking thing, and what happened? There are these other potential models that we could use to generate revenue that would, or generate token utility that would kind of potentially take us in some very different directions. And so the thing that I'm kind of, this is the part, like, just this is my gut, right? Is that these other directions, I don't know who is going to step up and suggest these other kind of like very different directions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we're fine with it just kind of like being the capital allocation and variations of that, then that's one thing. But if we really are trying to kind of like get some variety of options on the table, I don't know that group chat will do that. Maybe it will, but I think it's we could just, I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is we could take two strategies. One is the strategy where we are saying like we want to deliberately try to like get some different things, very different views on the table, so that we all feel good in the end that we've looked at like the wide range of options. And I think particularly Griff, like figuring out, I think he's feeling that we maybe haven't looked at all the options. Or the other option is more what you're saying, Bear, which is like just allow people to just trust that people will naturally do that. And if that doesn't naturally emerge, that's like, okay, that says something, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sure we didn't answer the question that you originally posed around how do we make the decision. So, and I think Bear, if I understood correctly, you're saying we can come up with these different options, or I don't know if it's really business models or more like just, strategic direction for the TEC. And then we can determine how to determine once we sort of have the whole list in front of us. I need to step away for 2 minutes. But I also don't know if this is like a good point to end the call, or are we is there more to discuss around this? Do we think, I guess the question is, do we think we can right now come up with a plan for how to make this decision? Because I feel it feels very vague to me. Like, I don't know what I would propose. I would probably propose, Tamara, how are we going to make this decision? I would probably say what makes sense right now is an open forum for discussion. And then it really comes down, this is to whoever is doing the work have to feel aligned with the work that's being done. And I think, as you're saying, Gideon, a lot of work has already been done for one model. And it's almost as if, like, a lot, maybe me included, are like, that's what we're doing. This makes sense. We've been talking about it for, a year. So maybe it's just an opportunity to see if there's other models that are competing and that make sense. Take a moment to double check. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I also don't know how else I would answer the question at this juncture. Any other, what do you think?
Yeah, I honestly don't know either. I know that there's some. I think that there is this kind of like unscratched itch, right? That exists, definitely with Griff, but I think possibly with others too, right? Especially those who are not that close. Like, is this really what the TC should be doing? And so I think that's partially what this is, and I don't know. I think this process, as it's currently defined, will probably lead us pretty easily to the capital allocation as the default. It's like, okay, yes, we thought we gave some time, and we're back to this other thing. So that's all I'm saying is, if we do want to push for some other model, I don't know if we're kind of set up for that. And that may be okay, but that's the thing that I'm raising, is that I think the momentum is towards the capital allocator, and I actually believe in that model personally, because I think it's probably our easiest path, and probably most powerful path. But I just want to make sure that we're giving that at the end of this, we don't feel like, okay, well, we kind of just did what we said. We took a month off and we just kind of did what we said we were going to already do. So I don't know. How do we make sure that we all feel like we've actually exercised this, and really feel like this is the logical one? And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. Baron, Nate, do you have any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I think this is a sprawling conversation. I think it covers so much, and I have my firm beliefs, and you're right. We are set up right now currently, and we have set up for the past couple months for this kind of capital allocation model to run grants, to do all these things. I do question, you know, what we fund and how we fund it is something that is really interesting discussion to have, as well as getting the augmented bonding curve and validating our approach as a commons as another issue to discuss. I think there are a lot of big discussion topics, but at the end of the day, how we decide is a really big question. Like, if we're just having this discussion with TCAN, and do we come to consensus? If we don't come to consensus, then what? Have I read over the kind of disagree and commit, which I'm on board with as a philosophy, but who's going to be disagreeing and who's going to be committing? It's one of those things where it's just, I feel like the personalities in the room are actually going to be the ones to decide it, if we don't have a kind of formal process. Um, so yeah, that is my only concern, is that we can have this kind of signaling that we do with the TCAN and see where people lie on this, and hopefully we have consensus around what we want to do. But if we don't, um, then yeah, I feel like we do need to have some type of procedure to actually say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then whether it's a vote or whatever it may be, I don't know. But there's got to be some way to figure out what direction we're going to go in. So yeah, that's my only concern. It's just the decision making process on it. We're hoping that everybody comes to consensus, but if that's not the case, then we have a problem.
Okay, let me just summarize, because I think I get what you're saying. Basically, you're concerned about the process. You think that we could probably do it through consensus, but if that fails, what's the backup?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that if you ask, or if you look at the people that have been more involved and working here in the TEC for the last year, there's probably consensus around us, between us, around this idea of the capital allocator model. I've seen what Sean thinks. I've seen what NT thinks. What the four of us think here, I think we all kind of like agree on that model. And maybe one of the reasons, like you were saying, Gideon, is that Griff he hasn't had the time to be able to be more involved and to actually get the whole context. So if we take that, I think that the consensus is there. It's already there. We're just taking some time to confirm. And I forgot again what I was gonna say. The other thing. And it was, yeah, I forgot. Don't know what's happening today to me, but yeah, I feel there's that consensus already there. So I think that makes it easier.
I mean, I guess my biggest fear is that the degree of conviction anybody has within that room on the day that we decide is going to have a large influence on the direction that we go in. And so, yeah, it really matters that we don't have this kind of like social dynamic group decision where one person is able to influence the consensus of rest, to where everybody just says, okay, I disagree, but I'll commit to it, where it's a minority view. And but yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm just gonna take that from.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I just remember what I was gonna say. I mean, the other thing is that in the scenario where another option could emerge, also what you were saying, Gideon, who is gonna? I think it's gonna be harder for someone to step up and lead that new direction and just kind of like start from zero. And because if you take the capital allocation model, we already have a whole year of work behind that model. So there's a lot of preparation there. So if we were to take a different direction, I feel that first someone to lead that, or different people to lead that and to take on that responsibility of shifting towards a new direction, that's going to take effort, that's going to take time, that's going to take resources. And I'm not exactly sure how everyone else is going to feel about that. How are we going to feel and reflect about the last year of work that we did, that we all kind of agreed that was really positive, that we really were able to shift the situation of the TEC. So yeah, I don't know. I feel it would be probably a weird situation also.
Let me just recap for you, Tim. Nate was basically saying, oh, did you hear it? Okay.
Yeah, I was listening. I mean, with one ear while I was having a full conversation. But yeah, it's all good points, but I think also I don't know if I said this well the previous time, but I think really what matters is that the people who are committed in doing the work need to think that the work that they're doing is the right direction. I think that a lot of weight should be given to the coordination team and the people in TCAN who are committed to actually executing the work. And I think maybe this is a little bit of what you're saying, Nate. It's we shouldn't have a stratum, is that the right word, of like people who decide what the work is and then people who execute the work. It really needs to be a tight feedback loop, and even more weight perhaps given to the people who are closest to the actual work because they're doing it. That's just my thinking in any decision-making process. And I think everyone involved is probably on board to all of the personalities. I think everyone is on board to go that route, to allow the agency of the people who are closest to the work and the people who are doing the work to direct the work.
I mean,
one of the interesting things that I feel like Jeff has mentioned to me is sort of, it's like, and this is like a competing direction for like the strategic plan, and this is old, maybe 6 months old or something, but it's like, wish the TEC would just give all the funding to token engineering projects and not even, not run anymore. And it's just like, oh, that's a different option, like, So it's true what you said earlier, Gideon, that like everyone has their own idea for what the TC should do. And the people that are doing the executing should have a lot of weight on what it is that's being executed. And if we look at this as sort of like advice process, I wasn't present on the call, of course, on how this came up, and I had a look at your roadmap. Really thought that was you put a lot of work into that. Bear, I know how much work goes into that, so I can see the hours that you've put into that, thinking and mapping it out. But I have a feeling at the end of this, we'll have more confidence in the direction that we're going. And sometimes we have to take a step back, and then we could take a step forward again. And I think that maybe this is what that was called for, just a moment to really think about, is this what we're going to do with the next 4 quarters? Is this really, really what we're going to do? And then we'll probably, I don't think we're going to pivot too much, but I felt like I haven't really absorbed what has been said. And I haven't really looked at what YGG's sense making document is like. So I think it'll be interesting to see what we end up doing, or the outcome of this process. But generally speaking, I think making, challenging that, are we doing the right thing, and taking some time to validate that we're doing the right thing for the next year worth of work is probably going to be good for us in the end. How the optimist sees it.
I'll add one more thing. Yeah, I think that, it could be that what we end up getting out of this is different from what we thought on Friday. So on Friday, I came out of this thinking, by the end of next week, we'll have an articulation, the existing strategy, and then there'll be somebody who'll be like, I really think that a two-sided marketplace, for matching clients with, actual token engineering providers, like that's one, or whatever it is, right? Like that there's like 2 or 3 of these other things, and then at the end we'd be like, okay, let's really think about this and blah, 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 right? But it might be that that's not what we end up with. It might be that, we create this space and like there's none of these other like radically different visions that come out. And we say, okay, that's okay, but now what do we do with that? How do we make that into lemonade? It's not even lemons, right? It's like, what do we do with that new situation? And I think that it could still be very useful, which is basically, okay, if the capital allocation thing is kind of the default, it's like, yeah, everybody is kind of moving in that direction, then what would it look like for everybody to then take a fresh cut at that, like, which is what Sean did, right? He looked at that and he's like, okay, here's how I interpret this. And like Nate, it would be like you taking that and going like, okay, here's how I would interpret this in terms of events. And then it's like looking at it from a business model perspective, and so Bear would be sitting down and kind of looking at the budget assumptions and like really trying to wrap all these things around that assumption. So I think if, by the end of the week, we don't see any kind of natural emerging. I mean, I think our strategy, our options are either to deliberately go about trying to provoke some very radically different views, or say, let's just see what emerges. That, I think, is kind of the decision that's before us right now. Or at least that's one way of doing it.
And can I ask a question about the dynamics between TCAN and the coordination team? Like, do we consider this completely the advice process procedure where the decision making lies with the coordination team, but in its TCAN's role to convince that this is the right path? Or is it, what is the dynamic, not just for this situation, but for every decision making situation moving forward between TCAN and the coordination team?
That's such a good question. And I would say that we're probably still in the process to figure that out. I think originally the idea was also that depending on the decisions, but for most decisions that are related with the commons, at the end of the day, the decision makers should be the token holders and the community, right? And then you only have TCAN as a way to suggest or advise, but not make decisions, right? And having that TCAN and those two groups of the TCAN and the stakeholders working together with a coordination team as the operating force, that actually makes the work a reality, and that also, of course, has a voice in the decision making and in the advice, right? But I do agree that there might be a need for more clarity in that dynamics, in that relationships between these three groups, at least the way I'm seeing it. Probably people here have different perspectives on it, but that's kind of like the way I see it.
I mean, I see it as I think there might be some ambiguity because there's so much overlap between the coordination team and the TCAN. But I see it as TCAN are advisors, not decision makers. But that's actually a really good point, Nate. And maybe that's why I was trying to express, the coordination team are the people who do the work. Some of the people on TCAN also may do some work. Like I contribute, even though I'm not on the coordination team. So I really think the role of TCAN should be advice process. I also really think the decision, I don't know if the community should decide the strategic direction because that's just a wild free for all, and they're also not, there's not enough context, I think, for somebody completely coming into this out of the blue to make a decision. I think that's fair to say. But I think advisory group should be an advisory group and not an executive or a team that executes.
Yeah, I would add on all of this that there's like high level, more like strategy kinds of things, macro direction kinds of things, and I feel like there's the coordination team that is executing, right? And we've had a challenge. Personally, I would say that on the coordination team, when I have tried to kind of get feedback on strategy docs and stuff like that, the feedback is, I would say it's moderate. Like, not everybody engages on those kinds of things, and I think, partially people are like busy executing. But I think that the TCAN, one of the things that we were trying to do was like move it so that it's not one person who's like coming up with strategy, but actually kind of a network of people who have been deeply involved, helping to kind of guide the macro strategy with like some directional stuff that then gets fed back into the coordination team. So there's like a dynamic of like, hey, here's what we're thinking. We're kind of interfacing with the outside world, thinking about like overall direction, and then getting a feedback loop going with the coordination team on like, does this make sense? And so it's like it's just like a dynamic. That's what I was thinking. But I don't, yeah.
I mean, sorry, Tom, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to be like, and to sum all of this up, I didn't even know how to sum it up. Is that what you were going to do more gracefully than I could?
No, I was going to maybe make it even more confusing, because I do agree that it does sound like a bit of a contradiction, right? The way we are framing TCAN, and then thinking about this whole process of defining a strategic direction, and we're basically saying, what's the process for the TCAN and the coordination team to decide on the strategic decision for the TEC, right? So it's kind of like, okay, but then if we're saying that TCAN are not decision makers, why are they going to decide, or how they and the coordination team are going to decide? So I see that could be turned like into a contradiction, right? But then it also makes a lot of sense, like even what you're saying about, there's like some what you, Tam, I think you were also saying about there are some things that are fine for the community to decide, kind of like more high level things, but then there are others that require way more context, way more understanding of the situations. And for this particular case of the strategic direction, I feel that's one of those cases that probably not everyone or anyone coming out of the blue from the community will be able to have a saying or an argument or be able to decide on this type of decisions, right? So it does make sense for these two groups to take on this responsibility. But at the same time, yeah, it's a bit weird. Like, people could probably misunderstand it as well, right? So I just wanted to yeah to raise that point as well. What do you think, Nate, about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you articulated it well. So I don't really have much to add to it. I think that having clarity on this from the expectation side of both the people in TCAN and from the coordination team needs to be clear. The way we do it, the way we make the decision is irrelevant to me. Like, I don't, like, I'm okay with a lot of process. I can disagree and commit to the process of how we make the decision, just as long as there's, clarity of expectations of, you know, TCAN, if the TCAN group is not expecting us to do the work that they dictate, like, then that might be cause for problems in the future for certain decisions. I just think the clarity needs to be on the expectations of what TCAN, the powers that TCAN has, what powers the coordination team has, and what types of decisions actually need to go to the community. We moved to this coordination team for the purpose of um, getting away from the DAO structure to be more productive and be more efficient with our decision making. And I think that's what we've committed to, and I think it's worked out really great. Um, but yeah, the expectations from TCAN members and the expectations from the coordination team, this needs to be clear, because I do think that if it isn't, then you're going to have some tensions and some conflict that you know may not get resolved or something. I don't know. Anything could happen, but yeah.
I know, I have faith. I have faith that the coordination team is not, and the TCAN group doesn't feel like they're dictating, and that the coordination team that won't feel like they're being dictated to. It's really about sort of looking at other. I don't know. I'm thinking this is what it's about. Looking at all our possibilities. Kicking the tires on our current strategic direction, and then this, which is now, I'm glad that we're saying it, but this disagree and commit, or I don't know. I don't feel as worried about it, but I feel like there's no clear decision making, but that's sort of going to lead to like a group discussion and then advice process. But I'm not having the maybe
I
same
think the biggest
concern.
conflict that I see is that the majority of individuals within TCAN are the largest stakeholders that we have in the TEC. And so that presents a little bit of an issue when it comes to actually voicing opinions as a coordination team to say, hey, if we decide that we want to do something contrary to what the TCAN group wants to do, and they have a significant stake that may have, um, you know, problems, not for this decision. I think this decision is going to be, and I have faith in the people in that room in general. But there may be decisions in the future that where this actually does become a big factor, and I think that's something to keep in mind.
Gideon, do you want to share final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I also have faith that we will figure this out. I think that what happens is in the abstract, this feels like there is like built-in structural issues that I think, in fact, in practice, are probably, just based on good faith of the individuals involved, we'll be able to work through pretty easily. I do think that if you look historically at what's happened, the TC's gone through some big changes. It went from a DAO, like a functioning DAO, to something that's more like a little nonprofit or a little organization that's was highly centralized, And so now we're in the process of kind of reconstituting and thinking about how we rebuild the engagement with a bunch of stakeholders. This is what Phil was saying, and I thought his comment was very interesting. Like, he's basically like, who are the stakeholders and how come we're not listening to them, And I think Bear and I have talked about this a lot, is that we've lost contact with all of our stakeholders. Like, they've turned away because they're not, this is a negative way of saying this. I wouldn't say this publicly, but I would say amongst us that we kind of lost the interest of most of our stakeholders over this last couple of years, or last year and a half. So, I think that part of what we're trying to do with this strategy is basically spin the DAO back up, so that it's interesting enough to people, relevant enough to people, and it's like coming up with a strategy to create that relevance so the stakeholders come back and they want to engage in these kinds of bigger decision processes. And yeah, Nate, I think the question of token holdings is a big one from that perspective, but I think that there are things that we need to do at that level that's like more about reputation and things like that. Like, we've got to come up with some more systemic approaches to solving those. In short, I think that to answer this question, I think that kind of what Bear suggested in the beginning to me feels like just maybe let this play out and just see what people come up with naturally of their own volition, rather than trying to kind of create some artificial impetus to come up with a radically different strategy. Just see what emerges. And then next week, maybe just like take that and say, this is what you were saying, Bear, take that and then just move to the next stage of like, okay, given this, what do we do next?
Yeah, maybe rather than next week, it's probably this Friday, right? Like, I'm not exactly sure how what's gonna happen like during that call, but yeah, let's see how things play out. I agree, and I also wanted to say that, yeah, I think these are the type of conversations that I think we need to have more. I really like them, and I really think they are pretty insightful. I just don't know exactly sometimes what's the right way to make them happen. Sometimes I feel like they happen pretty organically, pretty naturally when there are things to talk about, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the way. But yeah, I do feel that having these spaces and this time to have the conversations, and I feel there are so many topics that we need to discuss and have this type of conversations. As soon as we're doing it, I think that's totally fine, and that also goes together with this idea that I think we all share of faith in the TEC and on what we're doing. And yeah, I'm just really hoping that we take this process and this time and use it as a great opportunity, to confirm and to make things better. So yeah, there's nothing more to say for now.
Maybe there's one other thing I want to say, because disagree and commit comes from Amazon's leadership principles, which I really have been using as sort of a divining rod in my life and profession. But one of the other ones that I really like a lot is also bias for action. And I think maybe we should take that one to heart as well. it's, I think, really important to discuss a lot of these topics, but I think action is as important as having the discussions. And there are decisions that we can take and then change easily. There are decisions that we can't change easily. But for all the decisions that we can change easily, I think rather than talking about it, we just do it. And and work with a bias for action. That just, it's something that speaks to me personally a lot, and I incorporate a lot. And I think while we're talking about one of the Amazon leadership principles, that's another one that actually I think we could embrace in the TEC and just in everyone's personal lives as well. We are at the top of the hour, but anyone want to share any final thoughts before we hop off the call? It was a really good discussion. Thanks, Bear, Nate, and Gideon.
Thank you guys. That was a long call, but yeah, it's good. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Tam, thanks for facilitating the sprint.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sam.
I always enjoy it, actually. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
later in the week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.